So I messed up and didn't record an intro for this video, so in lieu of that, we're going to go ahead and do a thing. Hurricanes and typhoons are the same, they're false. What? That's obviously incorrect. In Shakespeare's play, Hamlet commits suicide. What? Oh, wow. The Forbidden City is in Beijing. I know that's true. Okay. All right. We're doing good. Cost is one of the four C's of diamond grading. That's false. Cost is the thigh bone femur is the largest bone in the human body. I think that's true. Yeah. Risotto is a common Italian rice dish. That's false. Oh, okay. The mint julep is a signature drink of the Kentucky Derby of horse racing. That is true. Seen those hats. Godfather Part 2 is the only film sequel to win an Academy Award for Best Picture. I'm going to go with false. Oh, okay, cool. Lord of the Rings. How you like that? Next. The prefix mega represents 1 million. Megawatts. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, that's right. An American was the first man in space. Tricky. No. The Russians. Okay, cool. So I got 7 out of 10 correct. That was fun, I guess. Enjoy a video about true and false in Excel. Here is a list of leads that recently closed, the person or persons that sold that deal, and then the total sale amount. Now, something to notice here, a couple things, a couple rules. Now, the first rule is that the salesperson gets a 12.5% commission rate. However, if they get assistance from the supervisor, who is Dan, he's italicized here, they get 2% of their commission deducted entirely. So one thing I wanted to sort out before we got into this was what true and false are and what you can do with them. Excel has a couple of cool things built in here. So first of all, obviously Excel has a formula built in called true. So if I went ahead and used the formula true, I would end up with true. At the same time, if I use the formula false, I end up with false. Seems pretty straightforward, pretty basic stuff. And then, you can start to couple that with other formulas that are available in here, including stuff like or, in which case, you provide the system some conditions. For example, like, let's make this super basic. So let's just say for the or match, one or more of these values needs to be true. So what we're going to do is we are literally just going to go ahead and use true, and we are then going to use false. And this, of course, is going to return true because at least one of those values is true. At the same time, if we were to do and, which is another formula inside of Excel, we can do, and true, and then we can, of course, do and false at the same time as the other condition, and that's going to come back false because they're not both true. So some pretty straightforward things to keep in your mind as we go through this. So another thing you should know is that true and false don't just represent, again, those words, but they also represent numbers. And we think about machine logic or any type of, really any piece of electronics, or even the way perhaps your home is designed, perhaps the way your own brain works, that kind of thing. We deal with things that are binary, so it's either zero or one, 0 or 1. If you had to guess, could you guess what true and false signify in terms of 0 and 1? You probably know the answer, but I'm going to show you. So one of the axioms in math is if you multiply anything by 1, you will get that thing. So if I multiply true by 1, I get 1. That should tell us something. By the same token, if I multiply false by 1, I'll get a 0. What this means by that axiom is that true equals 1 and false equals 0. It doesn't seem like it's too important at this stage, but what you're going to find is, as you start to involve true and false into your formulas and in your spreadsheets, that logic is going to come in handy. You're going to want to internalize that, because if you multiply any number by 1, you're going to get that number, which would mean that if you multiply any number by true, you're also going to get that number. In fact, I'll give you a quick example of this. So let's say, I turned 41 this year. I'm going to multiply 41 by true. Look at that. We get 41, which helps us understand that axiom, meaning that if you multiply 41 by true, you're going to end up with that number. And at the same time, if you multiply a number by false, which going by that axiom we understand to be 0, you will end up with 0. So let's take all this sort of these fundamentals that we've just learned here and roll that into what we're seeing in this spreadsheet. So the first thing I'm interested in is some commission rates. The important thing here is we want to know who sold it, how much commission they're getting, and whether or not they are losing any commission on the deal because Dan helped them. So we're going to talk about another concept here. This is less Excel and more just data in general. We're going to talk about something called feature engineering. In data, you have features. So in this case, you have a lead and salesperson. Those are features of the data set. And what you can do is you can then create features on top of those features. You do this in machine learning just to make things more efficient. It's easier for a model to ingest trues and falses rather than a list of various values in fields that will then, and it will need to think about it and then kind of come back and say, okay, it helps make things more efficient. So what we're going to do here is we're going to feature engineer some things. The first thing we're going to feature engineer is the salesperson. So number one, what we're going to do is we're going to create a column for every single possible salesperson. So we're going to create one for Bill, we're going to create one for Sean, we're going to create one for Kate, and we're going to create one for Diane. We're not going to create one for Dan just yet because he's not a salesperson. We don't really care about what he's up to just yet. We're gonna get to that. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna make these fields be true or false based upon what appears in the salesperson field. You probably already see where this is going. We're going to combine some knowledge now. We're going to combine something we talked about in an earlier video, which I'll drop the link right here, as far as named ranges. We're going to take advantage of that, and we're also going to take advantage of some of these references and also the true and false matching, and we're going to use that to help create features. So let's do that now. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to name each one of these headings, and you'll see why that's important in a second. We're going to name each one of these headings respective to their salesperson. So we're going to start with Bill. We're then going to name one for Sean. If I can spell his name. We're going to name one for Sean. Then we're going to name one for Kate. Oh my gosh. And then we're going to name one for Diane. By the way, these are all people that I've worked with in the past who were salespeople. They were all really good salespeople. So if you recognize yourself in here, congrats, because you made my Hall of Fame of cool people. So anyway, we get down to this now. We're going to use what's called the find formula. So find, what it does is it looks in a text string, it finds a certain value, and then it returns a number, basically. It'll bring back in a number based upon where it finds it in the text string. So we're actually going to type in Bill. And you see Bill there because we've defined that range. All good. And then we're going to search this salesperson field. Now, in doing this, what's going to happen is, since Bill is right there, it's going to spot it and it's going to come back with a number. Awesome. So we know that the string starts at position 1. Don't get confused by true and false just yet. Just focus on what I'm talking about here. So with find, it's going to tell us where that word appears in the string. So if I drag this down, here's how it's going to evolve. You're going to see a bunch of 1s because it's all at the beginning of the string, but you're going to see something else too. Errors. Now, there is a way to solve this problem. Basically, what we want to do is we want to apply a condition to this column to give us a true or false value. The cool thing about Excel is that it gives us a bunch of these conditions built in. So I'm going to go up here. I'm actually going to add in a formula called isNumber. And what it's going to do is it's going to evaluate this formula. And if it returns a number, it's going to say true. If it doesn't return a number, it's going to say false. So now what we've done is we've basically done a quick check to see if Bill is in the field. Easy. See that? So you see rows 2, rows 9, and row 11. They all contain Bill. Those are all Bill's sales. We're going to make this as easy as we can on ourselves. We're actually just going to go ahead and drag this across. One thing we're going to want to remember to do here, though, is to make sure that we use our absolute and relative references, because if we drag stuff across, we're going to end up looking at the wrong field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that F4 trick that we learned in the other video, and I'm going to make sure that it fixes column B. And then I'm going to make sure I drag that all the way down. And then I'm going to take this top one, I'm going to drag it across. So obviously this isn't true. We need to make some updates. So we're going to go up here, we're going to change this one to Sean. We're going to change this one to Kate. If I can spell her name. We're going to change this one to Diane. Awesome. Grab all these, drag it down, and you're going to see all the trues and falses kind of come out there, and you'll notice that they correspond. If you take a moment to look, they correspond correctly to the value in salesperson. And now we have an array of trues and falses that we can use. Awesome. So that's what they call feature engineering. We've broken it down to, a separate field for every single salesperson with true or false. The next thing we want to do is we want to calculate commissions. So let's look at the commission amount here. This should be very easy for us to do. We're not doing anything tricky or special here. We just want to know what the commission is. So in calculating the commission, there's a couple things we need to remember. The first thing is that it's a 12.5% base commission rate. So we're going to multiply the sale amount by 0.125, and that is going to give us the commission. And then we're going to make sure that if Dan assisted in any way, we're going to subtract 2% from that. So it's not going to be 10.5, it's actually going to be just 2% of the commission because, it's hard being a salesperson. We don't want to beat these people up too much. They got to feed themselves. So we're going to do a commission formula here that includes that logic. This one gets a little tricky, but I hope you'll kind of pay attention to what I'm doing, and I will explain it every step of the way. So I'm going to work up in here because it's going to be a little bit easier for you to see. So the first thing we're going to want to do is get that basic commission rate. So this equals C2, which is that sale amount. We're going to multiply that sale amount by 0.125, and that's going to give us the commission. Awesome. But we need to do a little more work on this. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in parentheses. So then that way we have that base number, and then we're going to work on that base number. Now, we learned before that true and false also are 1 and 0. So we're going to use a little tricky logic to get this to work for us. So we want to subtract 2% from this value if Dan is involved. So we're going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to say subtract parentheses, and then another parentheses. We're going to wrap this up. So C2, which is that sale amount, times 0.125. So that gives us our commission. And then we're going to multiply this by 0.02. We're going to add one more thing here, though. Here's the important part, so pay attention. This is where we've, got our number, and this would assume that Dan helped on everything. We're just going to squeeze something in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to squeeze in another factor. This factor is where we're going to put in a couple of different things we've seen. So the first thing we're going to add is number. So we want to go and look in that field and see if Dan appears. Then we're also going to do a find, which we've already done before. And we are going to use Dan. And we're going to find that within the salesperson field. Interesting. So we're going to wrap that up. We've got an is number. So now we have our formula. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to come back with a true and false value for Dan. We're going to use that because if it comes back true, it's going to be times 1, which is going to multiply the entire thing by 1, which is going to give us the value we want. If it comes back as 0, it's going to multiply everything by 0, in which case it's not going to subtract anything from the entire formula. So you'll see that's how we're kind of doing some hacky, tricky kind of Excel stuff. So if I press enter on this, it's going to give me a warning because I'm missing a parentheses somewhere. Let's see. Is number fine, Dan. Oh, I'm missing a fourth one. Okay, we'll accept that. Okay, so Bill earned $22.13, which is correct. So that's exciting, right? It seems to be working. So let's drag this formula down and see if it works for everything else. All we're doing is subtracting 0 or some number based upon that rule. We'll jump back to that rule again. If something is true, it's 1. If something is false, it's 0. So if we multiply something that's false, a false condition, by some number, it's going to come back 0. So in the case of this commission model, it's not going to result in anything. It's just this whole piece of the formula after this subtraction is going to be 0. And that's how that works. It's pretty simple. So if we go down the line, obviously, we can notice that for Dan's, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how that works. It's way easier than you think based upon what I've done in the past. If you give some practice with this, really just keep in mind that we call this truthy and falsy. So truthy means that true is equal to 1, and falsy means that 0 is equal to false. That's how it works. So if you have any kind of condition, whether you're matching numbers, you're matching text strings, you're doing anything like that, keep in mind that true and false have their own values. And then always remember that anything times 1 is going to be itself, and anything times 0 is going to be 0. You can use that anywhere. I hope this was helpful. I hope you understood exactly what I was getting at. And again, experiment with this a little bit. Experiment with the feature engineering, which I demonstrated. It'll help you kind of work on your thinking in spreadsheets and help them become more useful to you and others. And then, of course, if you have any questions about how this formula works, let me know. I could also mention too at the end of this, there are a lot of other is's in Excel. We've got is blank, is error, is even, is formula, is logical, is NA, is non-text, is number, is odd. So you have all these different things you can use to get a true and false value just based upon the characteristics of a field. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I will see you in the next Excel video.